Over the years, I've had modelers tell me that they'd love to try and scratch build because they knew I did some scratch building, but they're afraid to. They have anxiety about taking that first step. They either think that it takes a lot of expensive tools or a lot of talent or just years of experience. The truth is, almost every scratch builder that I know started by simply making a little part and gluing it onto a kit. Everything you see here has some scratch building on it. So why scratch build? Well, a couple of reasons are necessity. You're either missing a part, and you don't want to throw your kit away, so you want to try and recreate or replicate the parts that you're missing. You have a kit that has some poorly created detail and you want to improve on that detail, or it's missing the details altogether. And I'll show you some examples of all of those. And then if you want to take scratch building to its ultimate level, you want to build a model of something that there is no model of. And I'll give you an example of that. Think about the olden days when modelers would build ships, the old sailing ships. There were no kits of those. They may have had some plans and a stack of wood, and they would build these beautiful ships. Today, you can see there's several modelers out there that make these really neat spaceships that are completely fictitious, and that would be a lot of fun in that you don't have any scrutiny by someone saying, hey, you missed a rivet here or there. Or there's a ship, a car, an airplane, a tank, a truck, something that you'd love to build a model of, but there is no model of it. So you go out and find the real deal, you measure it, make your own drawings, grab some plastic and wood or whatever materials you're going to use and start creating. And I have an example of that here as well. So let me show you some basic scratch building and then we'll work our way up to maybe some more advanced levels. So this is an early Tamiya M1. I started building it many, many years ago and the hole was warped, so I got kind of tired of it and I just put it back in the box. Well, recently I popped it back out, finished building it, put some paint on it, and I added some antennas, if you can see them there, those aerials. Now you want to scratch your head and say, am I calling that scratch building? Absolutely. I just stretched some sprue over a candle, and when I got a couple that I liked, I glued them in place. That's all it was, but yet that falls into the category of scratch building. On this Academy M60 right next to it, I did very little. Once again, you see an antenna, but in the back here, and I'll show you a picture of it before I painted them, but I used some epoxy putty and made those, say, foam rolls for under your bedroll. I also made this little pack, haversack, whatever it is that's hanging off of the stowage rack here in the back. Did I add a lot of detail? No, but it helped to fill up this otherwise pretty much empty rack. And it was fun. This is a little Revell 72nd scale Panzerkampfwagen Mark III. The only thing that I did to this guy, if you look right here, you see a little grab handle. The kit just had a little bump of plastic, a little blob that was molded onto the top of the turret. And I wasn't going to put up with that. So I shaved that off and I bent a piece of copper wire, drilled a couple of holes, and put one on either side. You can see that I'll turn it around. There's one on the other side as well. And it looks just a ton better. It looks like a grab handle, not some nondescript bump on the top of the turret. One other thing that I did to this that was maybe a little more, took a little more craftsmanship, I guess, is the gun barrel. I got talked into entering a contest down in Phoenix. And so I thought this is one that I had recently finished, so I would take it with me. And I was just trying to make some basic groundwork, but it wasn't drying fast enough, so I put a hairdryer to it. Well, dopey me, I melted the gun barrel beyond saving it. So I took a piece of solid plastic rod and I chucked it up into my Dremel tool And I made this little gun barrel from scratch. So there's some scratch building. One of the added pluses to turning this out of a solid rod is there is no seam. So more basic scratch building. This guy here is a little Humvee from Italy. If you look at it and you're familiar with the kit, you're saying, hey, I don't see anything different from my kit on this one. What did you scratch build? Well, once again, like the M1 over here, I started building this quite a while ago, and then I lost interest in it, put it back in the box. Well, somehow I lost the mirrors. So these little mirrors are scratch built. Turn it around, and I have some pictures of them under construction before I painted them, so I can get a little closer. Yeah. So they turned out okay. I was able to save my kit because I wasn't afraid to make the parts that were missing. Let me show you another little tiny kit. So this is a little kit from Airfix, a fun little kit to build. And it has some special meaning to me because a friend of mine who has since passed away took me on a trip to England, and we stopped by several hobby shops. And something that we always try and do, just for the fun of it, is while we're on a trip somewhere, we would pick up a kit to take back to the motel room and to build while we were there. We never get it done, but we get started. Well, this was several years ago, and once again, I started building this and stopped for whatever reason. So I got it out recently after this friend had passed away, and I determined to finish it, but I found out I was missing a piece of the gun. So let me show you. You see that little guy right there, dead center? These are arms that when the crew would set up to fire this gun, these arms would be put out 90 degrees to the chassis of the gun, and the wheels would rotate up so they had a solid platform from which to fire the gun. Well, dopey me, I lost one of those. So I made one, and I'll show you a picture of what it looked like before I painted it. And also on the front of this little truck, if you see that horizontal bar and the braces or the brackets to which it is attached in front of the radiator, those didn't come in the kit. I noticed in several pictures that this truck had that structure on the front of it, so I made it out of some styrene sheet. I wasn't afraid to try, and it turned out pretty cool, I think. Never going to enter this in a contest. It's just going to be on my shelf for eternity. But there's not another one like this one in the world because it has parts on it that I made myself. Another hotel build is this little Italian tank from Tamiya. This is one of their older kits. Super fun. Not a lot to it, and I just built it pretty much out of the box because I wanted to have some fun. But it didn't have these sandbags. I noticed lots of pictures of these Italian tanks with sandbags, so I made these sandbags out of epoxy putty. And I made this little rope out of some twisted solder and added some chain. So a little bit of scratch building, once again, just added a little extra detail to an otherwise kind of a boring tank. Some more simple scratch building. This big bedroll on the front of this little SDKFC 222. This is an artillery kit that came in a Tamiya box. These tarps, blankets, whatever you want to call them, were made by folding tissue paper, getting it wet, stiffing it up with some very thinned out white glue, and it added some neat detail to the hull of this little armored car. I'm going to show you my first attempt at scratch building. Now, don't judge me too harshly. I built this guy probably 35 or 40 years ago. This was an Airfix Yak 9, and it came in the little blister packs. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I think it cost me 99 cents and molded in sky blue plastic. Anyway, very simple kit, but I wanted to put a motor in it. So I chopped off the front of this thing and just dug through my parts box, and I have a box of some styrene sheets and strips and shapes, and I just made what I thought looked like an engine. The canopy was super thick, kind of typical of some of those older Airfix kits. But I wanted to have it open, so I found a piece of clear acetate, and I got it hot with a hairdryer and formed it over a rod, so I gave it that radius. Well, over the years, that piece has yellowed, which is okay. It gives it the effect of being just an old airplane sitting out, derelict, forgotten. It's very crude, very rough, not at all what I would put up with today, but back then, that was my standard. So, once again, this is not going to be a contest winner, and I'd probably be a little embarrassed to show it to a lot of people, other than the fact that I'm very proud of having tried scratch building way back then. Right after that one, I started working on this Corsair. This is a Hasegawa kit. The wings do not fold, so I had to cut the wings, and I added the detail. There's some wiring, the little hydraulic lines and such, and the flap actuators and all that, and I drilled little holes in the flaps for those lightning holes and created that cockpit, if I get it to focus, from nothing. Added some detail to the motor. And what was neat about this, thing I really liked about it, was it was being offloaded from a ship. This was a Marine Corsair, and it had really just been through it. So they had this cradle, this attachment point that would hook into the center of gravity on the plane, and it would be just offloaded by a crane. And I thought it was a kind of a neat picture. So all of the markings were painted over, and I made these little locks, which is crooked, for the elevator and the rudder. So I turned this Corsair into something it wasn't meant to be by the kit manufacturer. It wasn't meant to have folded wings. It wasn't meant to have that cockpit in it, but I put it in there, and I made them from scratch. Super fun. Hawker Typhoon from Monogram. Why would I build a Monogram kit when you can get a much better kit from another manufacturer? Because I've always loved this kit, and I wanted to add a little extra detail. So I'll show you some before pictures. It's an aftermarket pilot. I added a homemade seat, added a little detail on the side walls of the cockpit, and also adding some plumbing and parts down in the wheel wells, just to give it a little bit of extra detail. I've done the same thing with Monogram Stuka. I did a whole video on that Stuka, and I'll show you just a few quick pictures of what I've done to add detail to that. Also adding detail to the Tamiya 222. The gun, the 20 millimeter gun that comes with the kit, is very basic. So I wanted to add some detail to it, and also add detail to the otherwise empty interior. Super fun. Some other basic detail to this Monogram M48. The grab handles on the side of the turret were molded to the turret, so just represented by a bump. And I didn't like that, so I sanded it off, and I made these with stretched sprue. And also, I got on to my one of my programs. I think it might have been just Word on my computer. So I drew up some ration boxes that I thought were scale, and I had the printing that I put on them in a color that I thought was about right. And I built one, and when the kit is done, I'll have several on the back. But once again, using paper for my material and just looking at pictures, I came up with the idea of making these boxes, and they were fun to do. Let's look at some figures. This guy started out life as a Verlinden tank mechanic. I can, there we go. So I gave him a mustache. I made the brim of this hat out of styrene plastic. The rest of it is epoxy putty. I added his vest and his bandana and his chaps, his holster, made from putty once again. Same with his belt buckle. His pistol was from another kit, but his cartridge belt back there and his actual belt on his pants I made from putty. And the Dutch oven was out of styrene once again. This was super fun to do. There's not another one like it on the planet because I made it myself. Fun with scratch building. Another basic bit of detail was to old Geronimo. This is a Pilly bust, and they captured Geronimo's facial features really well. For some reason, he had a referee's whistle hanging around his neck. I've never seen a picture of Geronimo with a referee's whistle. So I just, using my imagination, I got rid of the whistle and I gave him a squash blossom. Now, Geronimo's an Apache. Squash blossoms are Navajo typically, but it seemed a little more likely than a referee's whistle. Another figure that I wanted to make my own was this mountain man. Now, he was supposed to be carrying his hat in his hand and have a bandana on his head. Well, instead, I put his hat on his head and created this beaver trap from some extra chain that I had and some brass strip. That's what I made the trap out of. Once again, there's not another one like it because I did a little scratch building and made this one all my own. This little gal was super fun. I ordered some paints from a place in Texas called Reaper, and they have a habit of including a little figurine every time they send you an order. And this little elf princess, or whatever she is, came in my order. So I said, she looks like she should be standing in front of a castle door. So I made it. I made the basic structure is styrene. The door is of styrene. I added a little veneer of epoxy putty and sculpted the stone. The majority of the hinges are plastic with the little flourishes made with epoxy. And the little light was made from strip styrene, solid styrene, and it was super fun. And once again, the only one you'll see just like this one because of all the scratch building I did on it. And another one which was fun, I was trying to resurrect an old figure of Boromir from Lord of the Rings that I had painted when I was in high school. And it was rough and had been beat up over the years. So I stripped all the paint off and I rebuilt the parts that were missing, like the sword blade was gone. So I made that out of styrene. I made the little orc helmet and the orc sword and the arrows from scratch. Once again, the tree with the moss, or what I thought would be moss, was a wire armature, copper wire, that I twisted around and made kind of look like a tree. Then I coated it in epoxy putty. Now this guy, another casualty of moving. I have just to show you that I don't have anything against aftermarket parts, I have every aftermarket kit known to man at the time included in this kit when I built it. So it probably cost me we call that the full meal deal. I've probably spent over $100 in aftermarket for this kit. Didn't use all of it because I didn't like how some of it looked, including the grill in front of the radiator. The kit part was too thick. The photo etch parts were way too thin. So I made this grill out of styrene. and used the little placard there is made from one of the photo etch sets. This is a martyr from Italy, missing the glacis plate. I didn't want to throw the kit away, so I looked at photos. I took a piece of sheet styrene, made it fit the opening, did a little drawing on there to place my bolts and the hatch, and now I have a kit that I can finish. While I was working on it, I also noticed that the leaf springs for the running gear had big sink marks, so I made those myself as well. Now the last thing I'll show you is this one probably makes me the saddest because of the damage that was done to it, but I'll show you kind of a bad picture of what it looked like in its prime. But this is a model that I created. It's 1/72 scale, so it's tiny. There's my finger. The thing is tiny. Back when I wanted to build this, it was an FT-17, which is a French light tank from World War I. But the Americans built it under license, put their own turret on it, and put their own motor in it and their own guns. There was not a kit of this available when I wanted to build it. So I made it from scratch. So every piece you see here, I remember counting up how many parts I made. There was, what, 200 or 300. Everything on here was made from scratch, mostly out of strip and sheet styrene. All the rivets I punched into some thin styrene and shaved them off and glued them in place. The little motor is made from scratch. All the running gear, once again, made from scratch. And one of the techniques that was fun, I used several on this. If you look at the treads, I made 3 or 4 of them from plastic, and then I cast them in resin. And they turned out really well. The idler wheel here, I guess the drive sprocket, was vacuum formed with some other strip styrene added. And then on the turret, from that bad picture I'll show you, there's the commander's hatch. That was also vacuum formed. I made a wooden mold and stretched plastic over it with my little Mattel vacuum form. Scratch building isn't really about saving money. It isn't even about accuracy. It's about freedom. The moment you realize that you can make almost anything, your hobby changes forever. So the next time you're building a model and realize a detail is missing, don't immediately go online looking for a replacement. Stop for 5 minutes and ask yourself, could I build this? You might surprise yourself.